Good morning, everybody. We are live here at the birdhouse, and today we're talking about the different butterflies you can find out in your backyard, or if you're spending any time out hiking or going through any fields. Lots of butterflies are out there flying around, so I'll give you some of the different things that you can expect to see this time of the year, at least in upstate New York and along the East Coast in a lot of cases. If you are around that area, you can expect to see the same types of species. As always, we love to know what kind of things you're seeing. You can put any kind of sightings in the comments. If you have questions, you can throw those in there too. Or you can just say hi. We did have a butterfly walk on Tuesday, so we weren't live on Tuesday, at least streaming live, but we were at Whitehaven Park doing a butterfly walk. It was quite overcast, and we had gotten storms the day before, and we were getting storms later on that day of the walk. So we were able to still do our hike, but it was overcast, so we didn't see a lot. Towards the end of the hike, it started clearing up and started getting sunny. So we did see monarch butterfly flying around, but we did happen upon some monarch butterfly eggs and caterpillars too, which was really cool. Tiny, tiny, tiny little caterpillars, but there were some out there on the common milkweed, which was really neat. So the monarch butterflies are back. This is from my garden on I think it was Thursday morning. I had a monarch butterfly, the first one in my garden for the year, at least that I saw, coming to my swamp milkweed. So that was pretty exciting. The common milkweed's kind of fizzling out as far as being in bloom, but its leaves are nice and big for those butterflies to lay their eggs on. But right now, the swamp milkweed is in bloom, and the butterfly weed or the orange milkweed is in bloom also. So those are great places for these monarch butterflies to go to drink nectar and also lay their eggs. So monarch butterflies are coming back to the area. So in the future, look for caterpillars like this on your milkweed. Probably don't have any this big out there yet. It's a little early in the season, but this is what the caterpillars look like. So if you see a tiny, tiny, tiny little caterpillar with stripes on it, that is going to be most likely a monarch butterfly caterpillar, especially if it's on the milkweed, because that is their host plant that they need to survive to eat. So keep an eye out for these monarch butterflies floating through your garden, coming to the nectar producing plants. And if you have milkweed, they can tuck their abdomen, turn their abdomen, and they will lay eggs on the underside of those milkweed plants. So the monarch butterflies are out there. Now, this is a mimic of the monarch butterfly called the viceroy. It is smaller in size from the monarch butterfly, but it is super similar in color. So they can be really hard to identify one from the other. But if you can't tell just on size alone, if you've got a viceroy or a monarch, keep your eye out on this little stripe on the wing. The viceroys have this stripe that goes through their hind wing, which monarch butterflies do not have. So you're probably most likely to see monarch butterflies over the viceroys, but the viceroys are around here. So are a couple of other butterflies in that same family. This is a white admiral, it's called, has a really beautiful coloration. It's pretty dark in color with these beautiful big bold white stripes that go through the wings, and then it also has red and blue dots speckling its wings. If you see something like this that doesn't have the white stripe, that is called a red spotted purple. They're known to hybridize, especially in our area, but what I've been seeing most recently and most often, at least here in New York, is the white admiral. If you're further down south towards the Carolinas, you're probably more likely to see the red spotted purple. We had somebody on the walk on Tuesday who had just seen a morning cloak butterfly. So these are really common in the early spring because they do hibernate and spend all winter in their adult butterfly stage, which isn't super common for butterflies around here. So they are one of the first to emerge in the early spring. But we did have somebody who just saw one this week. So very dark butterfly with those blue polka dots, and then also that yellow edge going along its wings. Really cool butterfly there. But the most common thing you're most likely to see in your backyard or anywhere if you're outside is going to be this cabbage white butterfly. Super common. They will eat different vegetables and grasses as far as their caterpillars go. So they can feed on a whole bunch of different things. So they are pretty common in the area. You can tell the difference between male and female, which is pretty fun. The females will have 2 dots on their wings and the males will have 1. So this is a female here with the 2 dots on her wing, and then the males will just have 1 dot. So you can tell the difference there between male and female. And this is what their caterpillars look like. So if you have any different lettuces growing in your garden or broccoli, and you're noticing the leaves are starting to disappear, look on the underside of those leaves. You might have yourself some cabbage white butterfly caterpillars that are eating those leaves, and they do blend in really well with the leaves. I've found sometimes they'll go right along the stem and blend in, and you really have to do a double take to see them. But they are definitely around and easy to find in gardens. I came upon this butterfly yesterday. This is a clouded sulfur butterfly. Looks very similar to the cabbage white butterfly, but different coloration. They can also be quite yellow. And another type of butterfly you might see are skippers in the garden. And skippers have these triangular type wings, and when they fly, they look like they're skipping through the garden. So that's how they get their names. There's a whole bunch of different types. This is called the dun skipper. It's very nondescript. It's very brown in color. There's different orangish colored skippers. So we've got a whole bunch of different types. But if you see something small and triangular like this, that is going to be some type of skipper butterfly. Some other things to be out on the lookout for. I took this picture just yesterday with my cell phone camera. I came upon a great spangled fritillary, which was on a thistle plant there. And when it opened up its wings, you can see it's a bright, bright orange butterfly, really beautiful there, that I came across yesterday in a field. And I was able to see also a pearl crescent. So normally we think of butterflies coming to just flowers, which is true. They do love to drink nectar from flowers, but they also do a behavior called puddling, where especially the males will go to mud, wet mud. This picture here was from a fire pit that wasn't in use. So it was kind of a damp fire pit. And the puddling behavior butterflies will do, they'll siphon out the nutrients and the salts from the soil or the mud, or in this case, a fire pit, anything that might have some kind of nutrients for them, they will siphon it up. And so puddling behavior is common in butterflies as well. So if you are in a spot that has a bunch of mud, or if you're at the side of a pond that is also muddy and kind of damp, keep an eye out for butterflies doing this puddling behavior. And I took a video of it here too, just the butterfly there in the unused fire pit, just flapping its wings a little bit there. And that's called a pearl crescent butterfly. Another butterfly to be out on the lookout for that is blackish and reddish in color is the red admiral. And red admirals have been pretty common this year. They fly very erratically and very, very quick. And they have this beautiful red stripe that goes through their dark colored body. So a lot of them out here this year. So that is the red admiral. I've seen a few of them in my garden this year. And I came across this little butterfly yesterday as well, also by a fire pit. And this butterfly was very, very small, smaller than a cabbage white butterfly. So this is quite zoomed in. And it was sitting on a log that also had been in the fire pit. So it must have had some kind of nutrients or salts on it, because the butterfly was on there for a long time, also looking like it was doing this kind of puddling behavior. And although you can't see it from this picture, this is a butterfly called the eastern-tailed blue. And if you were to look at it, just this picture alone, that name doesn't sound descriptive of it at all. But now with this picture, now that you can see the whole wing, you can see its little tails. It does have these little tiny tails on its wings right here, where my mouse is is scrolling along. And that is how you know you've got yourself an eastern-tailed blue. It's in a family of butterflies called the blues. You might have heard of, if you're in New York, the Carner blue butterfly, which is an endangered species in our state. But there's little butterflies called spring is yours, summer is yours that we also have, that are these tiny, tiny little blue butterflies. And at rest, when their wings are above their body, they are white in color like this. But then when they open up their wings, and it can be hard to get a picture of them doing that, I was trying for quite a while yesterday, unsuccessfully. They are this beautiful bright blue. And so I think this is a video here of the butterfly just kind of hanging out on the log. And it looks like it was kind of doing some of this puddling behavior, even though the log wasn't wet. So you can see it's just kind of moving its wings a little bit. And you can see its little tails there on its wing moving too. So that is the eastern-tailed blue. And this is a picture that has been sent in previously by Yvonne of an eastern-tailed blue. Another photo there where you can see its wing, and it's got these tiny, tiny, tiny little tails that stick out the end. Only the eastern-tailed blue has that here in New York. Things like the spring is your and summer is your do not have those little tails. And this picture was taken in Pennsylvania, but it's the same species that we have here in New York. Now, another really small butterfly you might come across that isn't going to be blue in color, but it's really small, same kind of size as these little blue butterflies, again, smaller than your cabbage white butterfly, is going to be this one called the American copper. I saw quite a few of these out a couple of weeks ago. And when their wings are at rest above their body, they're very white in color, but then they also have this yellow patch. So that's pretty distinctive. And then when they open up their wings, they look totally different. So they're brown with these nice bright orange wings. So that's the American copper butterfly, really small as well. It's another very small butterfly, only about an inch or so long. So really, really tiny. And then there are the tiger swallowtails, of course. And if you see a large yellow butterfly, it's really, really big, it's most likely going to be a tiger swallowtail butterfly, especially if it's flying high above the treetops. That is where they will lay their eggs, usually in nice, big, deciduous trees. That's where they'll lay their eggs, and their caterpillars will feed high up in the treetops. So it's not uncommon to see them flying up high in the trees. And then this video here is from Christy, who works here at the store, who was lucky enough to have a tiger swallowtail visit her native lilies that she's got in her backyard. So really cool moment there of the tiger swallowtail coming to the lily, getting some nectar and pollen there. So that is your tiger swallowtail. Now, another swallowtail you might see that is also large and in the area is called the giant swallowtail. And this can look like a tiger swallowtail, especially when its wings are folded up over its body, like this picture shows. It is quite yellow. So this is a picture of the giant swallowtail that Kate took and sent in. But when its wings are open, it looks quite a bit different than the tiger swallowtail. So it's black with those big yellow stripes going through its body. So while its wings are at rest and over and up above its body, it looks very, very similar to your tiger swallowtail, but it doesn't have the same stripes as the tiger swallowtail does. So there's your tiger swallowtail, and then you've got the giant swallowtail, which looks quite a bit different when its wings are open. And like its name suggests, it is very, very large. And then there's also black swallowtail. This one you might see floating around your garden, especially if you do herb gardening, because the caterpillars will eat things like fennel and parsley and dill. Queen Anne's lace, if you have any of that is growing in the garden, you might want to just keep it and not pull it, even though it can sometimes be considered a weed, because it is a host plant for the black swallowtails. And this is what their caterpillars look like. And the caterpillars will go through different stages or growths called instars. So as they grow, they sometimes look different. And the black swallowtail is a very good example of that. It looks like these are found on some parsley. And when they're small, the black swallowtails are pretty dark in color, but as they grow, they have to shed their skin. And these are called larval instars. Monarch butterflies do this same thing. And with every instar, so every time they shed their skin, they look a little bit different each time. So you can see with each instar, they do look different. So you might want to check your herbs and see if you've got yourself any black swallowtail caterpillars that are eating them. If you're interested in seeing all these different larval instars of caterpillars, there's a really good book called The Life Cycles of Butterflies, and I'll show it to you a little bit later. I'll show you the cover a little bit better. But it has all these different instars of the caterpillars and what they look like, so it makes them easier to identify, especially when they're small. And if you're spending time out in the garden and you're seeing something flying around that looks maybe like a hummingbird, but it looks a little off, we're getting reports of the hummingbird clearwing moths coming to flowers right now. And this is what they look like. They look a lot like a hummingbird. They're similar in size, but they are a day-flying moth. And their wings are clear, just like its name suggests. But they do love things like bee balm. Here's a picture of one on some blazing star. So they also like these tubular plants like hummingbirds and the butterflies do. And you might just be lucky enough to see one in your yard. The last time I saw one, it was coming to some fuchsia in my flowering basket. So hummingbird clearwing moths are out there, as are some bees and wasps. And so we've gotten some photos of them sent in. And so I thought I'd show you some of those because it is that kind of time of the year. Here is one a picture of a nice big wasp that was sent in by Matt. And this is called a great golden digger wasp. And like its name suggests, they do go in the ground, but they are really, really neat. Really bright coloration, quite large too. So they are very showy. You might see them coming to your plants to pollinate and get some nectar and get some pollen, but quite a big, showy, large wasp. And then, of course, there's honeybees. Here's a photo of a little honeybee sent in by Erica, who had one on her flowers. And honeybees are great pollinators, and you might see them covered in pollen in these little sacks that they have on their feet, just stuffed full of pollen as they come to your garden. So lots of honeybees out there, also carpenter bees, and carpenter bees will come to pollinate your garden. They are also known to bore into wood. So these are the culprits. If you've got some kind of a bee that is chewing holes into maybe the side of your house or in other areas, it's probably going to be a carpenter bee. They are quite large and they're not as fuzzy as other bees in general. They don't have as much fur on them, if you will, or hairs on them. But there's lots of carpenter bees out there too every year. Carpenter bees, bumblebees, but then there's also mimics of bees. And this is a pretty neat one. This is called a bee fly. And if you look at its eyes, you can almost see the fly in it. But this is not a bee at all. It's super fuzzy like a bee is. It hovers like a bee does. But it is actually a type of fly. They can be hard to identify, bees versus flies. In general, flies have larger eyes, but that's not always the case. The flies have shorter antennae. They only have one set of wings instead of two. So bees will have two sets of wings. They tend to have longer antennas than flies, and they tend to have smaller eyes as well. And then bees also have that pinched waist. Let's see if I can show a good example of it. Like this is a really good example of a pinched waist. In a wasp, they have that really thin waist, but a fly won't have that. So if you've got a mimic of a bee or wasp that's actually a fly, they won't have that pinched waist like a bee and wasp does. And this one it's not the best example to show a pinched waist, but it does have that waist that goes down to a very small size. So there's also bee and wasp mimics out there. And so this is one called a bee fly. And then I happened upon one yesterday that I thought was some kind of a bumblebee. And I snapped a picture of it. And then when I was going to identify it, turns out it is this species. And it is called a bee mimic robber fly. And robber flies are pretty crazy. They fly through the air and they'll snatch insects up just kind of like a dragonfly does. And I didn't realize that there was a bee mimic version of the robber fly, but it was fuzzy like a bee. It was buzzing around like a bee. So I was quite surprised to find out it was actually not a bee at all. So I took a picture of this just yesterday. It was perched on the side of a tree that was getting some sun. So there's all kinds of interesting things out there that you never know what you'll see. And then finally, another thing I came upon yesterday while I was cleaning up the garden on one of my cages, my plant cages, I came across this thing, which is a praying mantis egg case. So I've seen these before on different things in the garden, like garden stakes that I have to stake up different plants. If they get left out over the winter, the praying mantises will lay their egg cases on them. And I'm sure these are due to hatch at any time. So I left it be. And next time I go to check on it, it'll be interesting to see if the mantids have crawled out yet. And this holds, I should have looked up how many, but hundreds easily of tiny, tiny little praying mantises will emerge from something like this. So that was pretty cool to see. There's lots of different bees and wasps out there now too. So people are trying to get them out of their feeders, or competing with the bees and wasps are competing with the hummingbirds a lot of the time at hummingbird feeders and oriole feeders. One thing you can do to keep the bees and especially wasps away from things like your hummingbird feeders or your oriole feeders are to put out the fake bald-faced hornets nests. They're called wasp scarers. We have a whole bunch of them here at the birdhouse, and they mimic a bald-faced hornet's nest. So it looks almost like a big paper lantern. And bald-faced hornets are these insects here in the bottom left. They are quite large, and while most wasps you see are going to be usually yellow and black, these are white and black, quite large, and their faces are very, very white, which is how they get their name, bald-faced hornets. And the fake wasp nests that you put out will mimic their nests, and because they're so territorial and they have a bad reputation of being quite nasty, they sting and they bite, bees and wasps tend to go elsewhere if they see that. So you can hang those fake wasp nests around your feeders. If you've got a pool that they're harassing you by, you can hang it over there, picnic areas, and that really helps. We also have essential oil, basically just some liquids that are peppermint oil or spearmint oil based that you can put on your feeders and around the feeding ports of your feeders that will also help to keep things like bees and wasps out of your feeders. If you are interested in learning more about butterflies, we've got a couple guides that I really, really love. This Butterflies of the Northeast is a little spiral guide, and it is super informative. And what I really like about it is, just like those Birds of New York books that we are promoting quite often by Stan Tequila, this guide is all organized by color. So if you see a butterfly that's orange, you go to the orange section. If it's got blue in it, you go to the blue section. So it's a really great, easy to use guide. It certainly doesn't have every butterfly in it that you will see on the East Coast, but it's a good start. So if you're just starting to learn about butterflies and you're interested in being able to easily identify them with a quick, easy to use guide that is small and compact and very nice to bring out on a trail with you, this guide is awesome. We also have the little laminated folding guides that have quite a bit of information in them. And again, super compact, easy to carry out on the trail. So we've got a whole bunch of butterfly guides. And then this is the book I was talking about that shows the different stages of the caterpillars. It's called The Life Stages of the Butterfly. And it has quite a few different species in there. And it shows their whole life cycle from egg, different instars of the caterpillars. It shows their chrysalis, and then the adult butterfly themselves. So that's a really, really cool book. And it tells you the host plants and everything like that for each species. So, and then finally, we do also have, if you are trying to raise, say, monarch butterflies, or if you want the kits where you can get caterpillars sent to you, like the painted ladybug butterfly caterpillars, we do have the butterfly garden kits here at the store as well, which is a fun activity for the summer. So that is everything I have prepared for you guys today. It was a lot of flying creatures that had nothing at all to do with birds. But we'll be back on Tuesday with another broadcast, and we will share your bird photos and give you an update about what is going on in the bird world locally. So until then, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.